Hello to all dear students. In this video we will be discussing about antihypertensive drugs. So as the name only says, antihypertensive drugs means these are the drugs that are used in the treatment of hypertension. Hypertension means it is a problem of elevated blood pressure. So a blood pressure of 120 upon 80 millimeter of mercury is said to be a normal blood pressure. Here 120 means systolic blood pressure. Systolic blood pressure and 80 means diastolic blood pressure. Okay, so whenever systolic blood pressure is 120 and diastolic blood pressure is 80 millimeter of mercury means it is said to be a normal blood pressure, and whenever the range increases from this value it is said to be hypertension. But that doesn't mean that 121 by 81 millimeter of mercury means an hypertension. We have got a certain range for hypertension, like if the blood pressure is more than systolic blood pressure is more than 130 and diastolic blood pressure more than 90 millimeter of mercury means that can be designated as a hypertensive condition. Now first of all we'll check out what is meant by systolic blood pressure and what is meant by a diastolic blood pressure. Now suppose this is your left side of the heart, the left atrium, and this one is the left ventricle, and this is the aorta. This one is the various arterial branches. Okay. Now systolic blood pressure. What is meant by systole? Systole means contraction. So whenever this left ventricle will contract, then what will happen? Yes, first of all we have got a mitral wall over here, and here we have got an aortic wall. Whenever the left ventricle contracts, the mitral wall will be closed but the aortic wall will be open. Why it will be open? Because the pressure in the left ventricle will be more as compared to the pressure in the aorta. So it will cause opening of the this aortic wall, and with pressure the blood will be moving inside this aorta. Okay, so whenever the left ventricle contracts, the blood with high pressure will be moving into the aorta. Okay, next once this aorta will receive the blood, what will happen? Large amount of blood will be received by this aorta, and this aorta is a kind of elastic blood vessel, that because of elasticity there will be increase in the size of this aorta. Okay, there will be increase in the diameter of the aorta, and what is has been come over here, along with blood a high pressure has been received by this aorta. Next, after this has been completed, the pressure inside the aorta will be more as compared to the pressure inside this left ventricle. So after this aortic wall will be closed. Okay, so whenever the contraction occurred, means we are talking about systolic blood pressure for now. Whenever the left ventricle contracted, a large amount of blood with pressure were being moved inside this aorta. So systolic blood pressure means it is the pressure which is exerted upon the walls of the major artery whenever the left ventricle contracted. Okay, so this is the systolic blood pressure. Next, what is meant by a diastolic blood pressure? Diastolic blood pressure means whenever the left ventricle are under diastole. Diastole means relaxation. When the left ventricle is under relaxation, then what will happen? First of all, the pressure will be reduced over here. The pressure in the left ventricle will be less as compared to the pressure in the aorta. So because of more pressure in the aorta, it will cause closure of this aortic wall first, and next it will cause means after means during systole there was increase in the size of this aorta, and next after dilation it should come back relaxation. So when it was recoiling, when this aortic wall when this aorta was recoiling, then what will happen? The blood will be forced to move forward and backward. Okay, and it cannot move backward back into the left ventricle because of the closure of this aortic wall. So the blood is forced to move into the branches of the arteries, and whatever pressure was been exerted in this aorta in this artery whenever the left ventricle was been relaxing was known as diastolic blood pressure. Okay, systolic blood pressure means it is a pressure exerted by the major wall of the artery whenever the left ventricle was contracting. Diastolic blood pressure means the pressure exerted upon the wall of the aorta or the major artery whenever the left ventricle was been relaxing. Okay, so this is the meaning of systolic blood pressure and diastolic blood pressure. Next, the systolic blood pressure mainly depends upon the cardiac output, whereas the diastolic blood pressure mainly depends upon the total peripheral resistance. Now, what is meant by this total peripheral resistance? We shall check out now. Again, making the diagram of your left side of the heart. So first of all, we should know what is meant by total peripheral resistance, and diastolic blood pressure mainly depends upon the total peripheral resistance. Okay, so during diastole, what was happening? Yes, the ventricles were been relaxing. Because of the relaxation of the ventricle, first of all, this aortic valve will be closed and the blood is forced to move forward towards these branches of the arteries. Okay, now suppose we give any drug that is causing constriction of these arteries, then what will happen? Yes, it will offer less resistance for the flow of blood or more resistance? Yes, obviously more resistance. So this is known as total peripheral resistance, which is nothing but your afterload. Total peripheral resistance means it is the resistance offered by all the arteries for the flow of blood is known as total peripheral resistance. Like for example, just you take a simple example, suppose there is very cold climate. So in cold climate, what you will feel? You will feel that your fingers become very numb, your tip of the fingers become very much numb, very much cold. Even the tip of your nose will become very much cold and very much cold it will become. Why? Because of total peripheral resistance, because all the arteries got constricted, and because of constriction of the arteries, it will offer a more resistance for the flow of the blood. Your tip of the fingers will not get a sufficient blood flow, because of which these fingertips will become very much numb, very much cold, very much what to say, you might have experienced. Even the tip of the nose will become very much cold because of the total peripheral resistance. Because of the constriction of the arteries, there won't be a sufficient blood supply to the extremities. Okay, so this is what happening over here. Whenever the arteries get constricted means it will offer more resistance for the flow of the blood, and this is what is known as total peripheral resistance. And diastolic blood pressure mainly depends upon the total peripheral resistance. When the total peripheral resistance is more, it will cause an increase in the diastolic blood pressure. Okay, from 80 it may be 90 or 100 millimeter of mercury. Next, systolic blood pressure mainly depends upon the cardiac output, and this cardiac output mainly depends upon two important things. First one is preload, and second one is the contractility. Okay. Now, preload is nothing but the end diastolic volume. End diastolic volume is normally 140 ml. When the end diastolic volume is more, it will offer more cardiac output or more stroke volume. When it is more, means it more amount of pressure has been exerted on this aorta, and therefore there will be increased systolic blood pressure. Okay, so when preload is more and diastolic volume is more, it will cause increase in the cardiac output and thereby increase in the systolic blood pressure. Next, contractility also increases the systolic blood pressure. When the force of contraction is more, next the cardiac output, the stroke volume is also been more, and thereby the systolic blood pressure also increases. Okay, so this is the basic regarding the antihypertensive drug. The most important thing for the management of this hypertension, what you should remember is systolic blood pressure mainly depends upon cardiac output. Okay, and cardiac output mainly depends upon preload and contractility. If you are giving any drug that is increasing preload means it will increase the systolic blood pressure. If you are increasing the force of contraction means it will also increase the systolic blood pressure. So if you want to treat systolic blood pressure means you should give a drug that is reducing the preload, and we know a major preload reducers are, we know dilators, and by giving diuretics we can reduce the preload. Next, contractility. How can we reduce the force of contraction? Yes, by giving a negative inotropic drugs. Okay, similarly, if you want to treat diastolic blood pressure, what we need to do? We need to reduce the total peripheral resistance. How? By causing dilation of the arteries, by giving some arteriolar dilators like calcium channel blockers or any such kind of drugs. We can reduce the total peripheral resistance and thereby reduce or treat the diastolic blood pressure. Okay, so this is about the basic ideology regarding this antihypertensive drug. Next, very quickly we shall check out various drugs that can be used in the treatment of hypertension. Alright, so this is a very basic diagram by which we can understand about how antihypertensive drugs will be acting. Here I have drawn left side of the heart and this one is the right side of the heart. This is the aorta and this aorta is branching into arterioles, and these arterioles are branching into capillaries. Capillaries back into veins, and then draining into the right side of the heart. From the right side, right atrium to right ventricle, and then from the right ventricle arises your pulmonary artery, and via this pulmonary artery the deoxygenated blood is been moved inside this lungs. Okay, this is lung, and I have shown one alveoli, and this is the capillary exchange of gases taking place where deoxygenated blood is converted into oxygenated blood, and this oxygenated blood is moved back into the left side of the heart. Two extra organs such as liver I have shown. It is the hepatic artery, and this is the hepatic vein, and this is your kidney with one nephron, the afferent and efferent arteriole I have shown. Okay, so this is the basic thing, and this the most important thing is your brain. Now in the brain we have got area on the medulla oblongata, and that area is the vasoactive area, and from this vasoactive area we have got sympathetic outflow. So we have got a preganglionic neuron arising from here. Okay, this is the preganglionic neuron, and attached to the preganglionic neuron will be obviously your postganglionic neuron, and one of the postganglionic neuron is approaching to your myocardium, where it will have its receptor, that is beta 1 receptor. Similarly, one more preganglionic neuron is approaching to the arteries, where it has got alpha 1 receptor, and another preganglionic neuron is approaching to the veins, where it is having alpha 1 receptor here as well, and another preganglionic neuron which is approaching to your kidney, in the kidney to the juxtaglomerular apparatus, where it has got beta 1 receptor. Now first of all we shall quickly discuss what happens when the sympathetic nervous system gets activated. Okay, upon activation, first of all the beta 1 receptor on the heart, it will cause an increase in the force of contraction. Now what will happen when force of contraction has been increased? Yes, that means the contractility has been increased. When contractility is increased means it will cause an increase in the systolic blood pressure. Next, a neuron is approaching to your alpha 1 receptor of the arteries, and what happens when alpha 1 receptor of these arteries has been contracted or activated? Yes, it will produce arteriolar constriction. Arteriolar constriction means it will increase the total peripheral resistance, and in turn it will cause an increase in the diastolic blood pressure. Next, we have got a neuron which is approaching to your alpha 1 receptor of the veins, that will produce venoconstriction. When venous constriction occurs, that means it will increase the preload. When preload is increased means cardiac output is increased. When cardiac output is increased means the systolic blood pressure is also being increased. Lastly, we have got a last area where this postganglionic neuron will be approaching is the beta 1 receptor of the juxtaglomerular apparatus. Now what happens when this happens? Yes, when juxtaglomerular apparatus will get activated, then what will happen? It will cause release of a renin, the enzyme renin. Okay, and what this enzyme renin will be doing? From the liver, angiotensinogen will be released, and this renin will act on this angiotensinogen and convert angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1. Now this angiotensin 1 via the venous circulation will be moving to the right side of the heart, to the right atrium first and then to the right ventricle, and then from here it is approaching to the liver. In the liver one enzyme is present, that is angiotensin converting enzyme. And what is angiotensin converting enzyme will be doing? It is converting angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. Now what this angiotensin 2 will be do? It will move over here to the left atrium, and then via the left ventricle it will be moving to the various parts of the body, and it is present in the circulation now, and it will interact with its receptor. So what all are the areas where the angiotensin receptors are present? Yes, I'll be making it in pink color. The angiotensin receptor are present on the arteries, activation of which will cause arteriolar constriction. It is present on the veins, activation of which will cause venoconstriction. Plus it is also present on the adrenal cortex, activation of which will cause release of aldosterone. This aldosterone will increase the fluid load, because of which preload will be increased, and when preload is increased means it will increase the cardiac output and thereby increase the systolic blood pressure. Okay. Next, angiotensin receptors are also present on the adrenal medulla, because of which it will increase the sympathetic outflow. Okay. So these all are the things that occurs because of sympathetic activation. Now very quickly coming to the various classes of drugs that we are going to discuss for the treatment of this hypertension. So the very first class is the centrally acting sympatholytics. So we can see the main villain is this sympathetic activation. So why not to give a sympatholytic drug? That is centrally acting sympatholytic drug. So the very first class of drug that can be used in the treatment of hypertension is central sympatholytics. We'll make it here in this book. So the first class of drug that can be used in the treatment of hypertension is central sympatholytics. So central means it is basically acting inside your central nervous system. So where in the medulla oblongata, where these or post and preganglionic neurons are present, the main area, the main central area, here it is acting. So I'll first of all draw a diagram of the neuron, and then we shall check out what is the mechanism of action of these centrally acting sympatholytics. So suppose this is the first neuron, cell body and the end terminal, and suppose this is your postganglionic neuron where all the receptors are been present. So here this neuron have got vesicles containing norepinephrine, and whenever this norepinephrine this neuron gets activated, it will cause release of these neurotransmitters, and these neurotransmitters will be acting upon their receptors. Okay, normally. Now we have got various adrenergic receptors such as alpha 1 receptor, beta 1 receptor, beta 2 receptor. These are present post junctionally, but there is one receptor which is present pre-junctionally. Pre-junctionally means it is present on the neuron from which it is been from which the neurotransmitters are being released, and this receptor is a kind of alpha 2 receptor, and this alpha 2 receptor are just like brakes. Like in the vehicle you have got brakes. Now whenever you apply brakes, the vehicle will stop. Similarly, alpha 2 receptor are acting like a brakes. So whenever this neuron gets activated, it will cause release of its neurotransmitter which will act on its receptor, and it will also act on the receptor which is present pre-junctionally, and when it interact with the alpha 2 receptor means this alpha 2 receptor will get activated and it will apply brakes. Brakes means the further release of this norepinephrine will be inhibited, means you can say the total sympathetic outflow will be inhibited whenever you cause activation of this alpha 2 receptor. So we have got an alpha 2 receptor agonist, and the name of that drug is clonidine. Okay, so what is clonidine is doing? Suppose this is the drug clonidine. What this drug is doing, it will cause continuous activation of this alpha 2 receptor, and when alpha 2 receptor are continuously activated means there is continuous brakes applied, there is continuous inhibition of the release of norepinephrine. So this is how this centrally acting drug is acting. So the example of centrally acting sympatholytics is clonidine. Apart from clonidine, we have got one more centrally acting sympatholytic, and the name of that drug is methyl dopa. Okay, we know the mechanism of action of clonidine. It will directly interact with the alpha 2 receptor, causing its activation. But the mechanism of methyl dopa is a little bit different. So for understanding the mechanism of action of methyl dopa, first of all you should understand the synthesis of norepinephrine. So we know norepinephrine, how they are synthesized. Suppose this is the nerve ending, and in the nerve ending there will be first of all influx of tyrosine, and this tyrosine is been converted into dopa by the enzyme hydroxylase. This dopa is then converted into dopamine, and this dopamine will be moving inside the vesicle via the VMAT transporter, and inside the vesicle dopamine is been converted into norepinephrine by hydroxylase enzyme. This thing we know. Now what happened when we consume our drug methyl dopa? Then what will happen? We are fooling this enzyme. So this here the enzyme is there na, decarboxylase enzyme, dopa decarboxylase. We are fooling this enzyme by giving methyl dopa. So this enzyme will get confused as whether I should act on dopa or whether I should act on methyl dopa. So we are giving so much excess of methyl dopa that it will treat methyl dopa as a correct thing, and this decarboxylase enzyme, it will convert methyl dopa, here I'll write, it will convert methyl dopa into methyl dopamine. Okay, so this methyl dopa is then converted into methyl dopamine, and this methyl dopamine is moving inside the vesicle, and inside the vesicle the enzyme hydroxylase will be converting methyl dopamine into methyl norepinephrine, and when this neuron gets activated it will cause release of methyl norepinephrine only. Okay, now what this methyl norepinephrine will be doing? This methyl norepinephrine, it is a potent agonist of this alpha 2 receptor. Okay, methyl norepinephrine. Like clonidine, it is also causing activation of alpha 2 receptor. Activation of alpha 2 receptor means activation of the brakes, and when brakes are applied the vehicles are being stopped. And what is the vehicle over here? The vehicle is our norepinephrine. The further release of norepinephrine is been inhibited by methyl norepinephrine. Okay, so this is the mechanism of action of these two drugs, clonidine and methyl dopa. Both are centrally acting sympatholytic agent. Both are causing inhibition of the release of norepinephrine from the neurons, but the mechanism of action of both are little bit different. Now coming to another class of drug, the second class of drug we'll check out are the receptor blockers. So first of all we should know about the alpha receptor blockers. Second class of drug we'll write about alpha blockers. Now what will happen when alpha receptors are being blocked? First of all, what are the location when alpha receptors are present? Yes, we know alpha 1 receptor is present on the arteries, alpha receptor or alpha 1 receptor is present on the veins. When we block alpha 1 receptor of the arteries, it will cause arteriolar dilation. When arteries are dilated means it will reduce the total peripheral resistance. When total peripheral resistance is reduced means it will reduce the diastolic blood pressure. Similarly, when alpha 1 receptor of the veins are being dilated, then it will produce venodilation. It will cause pooling of the blood back into the periphery, because of which the preload will be reduced and diastolic volume will be reduced, thereby cardiac Cardiac output is also reduced. When cardiac output is reduced, we know the systolic blood pressure is also being reduced. Okay, always remember this thing. The systolic blood pressure is directly proportional to the cardiac output. Cardiac output depends upon preload and contraction, whereas the diastolic blood pressure, it is directly proportional to the total peripheral resistance. Total peripheral resistance means the afterload. Okay, so when we are giving an alpha 1 blocker, means it is blocking the constriction action of the arteries. That means the arteries will get dilated. When arteries get dilated, means total peripheral resistance will be reduced, thereby diastolic blood pressure is also reduced. Similarly, when we are dilating the veins, then what is happening? The preload, because it is causing pooling of the blood to the periphery, therefore the preload, the venous return is been reduced. When venous return is reduced, preload is also reduced, and we know when preload is reduced, cardiac output is reduced. When cardiac output is reduced, then systolic blood pressures are also been reduced. So we can use alpha 1 blockers. Okay, I should write alpha 1 blockers, or just simply alpha blockers, for treating both systolic as well as diastolic blood pressure. Now these alpha blockers are of two types. One is non-selective alpha blocker and another one is selective alpha blockers. Okay, non-selective alpha blockers means these are the agent that will block both alpha 1 as well as alpha 2 receptors, whereas selective alpha blockers are blocking only and only alpha 1 receptors. So very quickly we shall check out the examples of drugs coming under these class. The selective alpha 1 blockers are prazosin, terazosin and doxazosin. Okay. Now, no doubt these alpha blockers are useful for reducing both systolic and diastolic blood pressure, but with the advantage, it has got disadvantages as well. Okay, now suppose for example there is a person who is not taking any kind of alpha blocker. He was just lying on the bed, and afterwards he suddenly stands up. Then what will happen when he stands up suddenly? Because of gravity, all the blood will be moving to the lower part of the body, and the brain will not get a sufficient blood supply. But in response to it, we have got a mechanism that will what to say, that will regulate everything. So whenever we are stand after sleeping, if we are stand immediately, very suddenly, so there will be pooling of the blood towards the lower part of the body because of gravity. But to avoid this thing, what is happening? The veins of our legs, it will cause constriction. Okay, and when veins will constrict, it will cause more forceful movement, or there will be increased preload, means there will be increased movement or forceful movement of the blood towards the upper part of the body, so that the brain is getting a sufficient blood supply. Now suppose any person is taking alpha 1 blocker, then what will happen? Yes, alpha 1 blocker will block the veins as well as arteries. That means that it will cause venodilation. Now suppose any person who is consuming alpha 1 blockers such as prazosin or terazosin, if that person was lying on bed and suddenly the person gets up, then what will happen? Because of gravity, all the blood will be moving towards the lower part of the body, and brain will not get a sufficient blood supply. Next, another thing is the veins should contract to so that brain should get a blood supply. The vein should contract, but we are giving alpha 1 blocker. That way the veins will not be constricting, the veins will be dilating, so that because of this reason the brain is not getting a sufficient blood supply. So in this condition, the patient will be suffering from fainting, dizziness, blackout and nausea, and he may even fall. Okay, so why all these things are happening? Because we are blocking alpha 1 receptor. So as such, constriction was very much helpful for supplying a good blood supply to the brain. But when you are giving alpha 1 blocker, means the veins will not constrict, and therefore there won't be any forceful supply or a speed supply of blood to your central nervous system, because of which the patients will be complaining about blackouts. Now this is the disadvantage of these alpha 1 blockers. Next, talking about these non-selective alpha blockers, the examples are like phentolamine, and another example is phenoxybenzamide. So what should we select? Should we select a selective blocker or a non-selective blockers? Okay, we shall till now we understood that what happens, what is the problem faced by alpha 1 blocker. Next, we shall check out what is the scenario occurring when you are giving a non-selective alpha blocker. So suppose this is your myocardium. Okay, now we have got alpha 1 receptor on the veins as well as arteries, to which we have blocked, because of which it is causing the arteriolar dilation and vasodilation. But sympathetic supply, where at what all areas the sympathetic nerves are been supplying? Yes, sympathetic nerves are supplying to the everywhere, to the heart, to the veins, as well as to the arteries. Okay, now what thing we have given? We have given a non-selective alpha blocker, or non-selective alpha blocker means these agents are blocking both alpha 1 as well as alpha 2 receptor. Now because of blockade of alpha 1 receptor, there won't be arteriolar constriction, there won't be any venoconstriction. Okay, but you have given alpha 2 blockers also. So what happens when alpha 2 receptors are being blocked? Yes, as I have told you, alpha 2 receptor acts as brakes. When you activate alpha 2 receptor, brakes are applied and there will be reduced release of the norepinephrine. But when you are blocking this alpha 2 receptor, then what will happen? Yes, brakes will fail. That means large amount of norepinephrine will be releasing, and upon the heart we know we have got beta 1 receptor also, and large amount of norepinephrine will interact with the beta 1 receptor, because of which even heart rate will be increasing, and heart rate will be increasing in such a pathological manner that the patient will be suffering from palpitation. Palpitation means it is a pathological condition where the person will be feeling the heartbeat. He can sense, means he can hear the sound of the heartbeat, that is palpitation. So because of this non-selective alpha blockers, the patient are suffering from blackout, along the patient is suffering from palpitation along with the dizziness, nausea and blackout. Okay, so when you are giving just alpha 1 blocker, only brain was not getting sufficient blood supply, because of which the person was suffering from dizziness, nausea and blackout. But when you are giving a non-selective alpha blockers, the brain is also not getting sufficient blood supply, plus the heart rate is increasing, so that the person is suffering from palpitation. Okay, so much adverse effect has been seen by alpha blockers. Now coming to another class of drug, that is beta blockers. We shall check out what will happen. Beta receptor blockers. The drugs coming under this class are propranolol, which is a prototype drug. Next we have got metoprolol and atenolol. Okay, so where exactly these beta receptors are present, or you can say beta 1 receptor? Beta 1 receptor is present on the heart, where it is increasing the heart rate and force of contraction. It is also present on the juxtaglomerular apparatus, where it is causing release of renin, and thereby it is ending up with angiotensin 2, which is increasing the afterload, preload and aldosterone release. Okay, now what is happening when we give an beta blockers? When you are giving beta blockers means it is reducing the force of contraction. Okay, when contraction is reduced means it will cause a reduction in the cardiac output and thereby reduction in the systolic blood pressure. Similarly, when the beta 1 receptor of the juxtaglomerular apparatus are being inhibited, then what will happen? It will inhibit the release of renin, and thereby there won't be any formation of angiotensin 1, no angiotensin 2, and thereby no angiotensin 2 mediated problems such as arteriolar constriction will be inhibited, venous constriction is inhibited, and aldosterone release is also been inhibited. Okay, so in total you can say by giving beta blockers you are reducing both systolic as well as diastolic blood pressure. Okay, so next, and another class of drug we have got, which is a mixture of these two, that is alpha plus beta blockers. Alpha plus beta blockers, and the examples of drugs coming under this class are labetalol, and carvedilol. Okay, so this is all about the receptor blockers. Okay, next another class of drugs that we'll check out now over here is the vasodilators. Fifth class is vasodilators. So in vasodilators we have got few vasodilators that are only and only causing dilation of the arteries. So the example of drug coming under this class are hydralazine, minoxidil, and lastly diazoxide. Okay, so these three drugs are causing dilation of only arteries. Arteries dilation means what is happening? Yes, when arteries are getting dilated means it is reducing the total peripheral resistance and thereby causing a reduction in the diastolic blood pressure. Next, we have got another class of vasodilators that will cause dilation of both arteries as well as the veins, and the example is sodium nitroprusside. Okay, now very quickly we shall check out the mechanism of action of these vasodilators. First of all, we'll talk about the diazoxide. Regarding diazoxide, suppose this is your blood vessel, that is your arterial blood vessel, one of the cell of your arterial blood vessel. So what this diazoxide basically are doing, they are causing opening of the potassium channels. Now what happens when these potassium channels are been opened? Yes, where is the concentration of potassium ion more, inside of the cell or outside of the cell? Yes, we know potassium ion are mainly present inside of the cell. Potassium ion is the intracellular electrolyte. Okay, and when you are opening the potassium channel, because of concentration gradient, the potassium ions are forced to move outside of the cell. Now what will happen to the polarity? What will be happening to the charges of this particular cell? So before it was at a resting membrane potential, suppose minus 60 millivolt is the resting membrane potential, and when there is loss of cation, then it will drag the resting membrane potential towards a more negative side, suppose minus 80 millivolt. So this condition is known as hyperpolarization. Okay, so drugs such as diazoxide, how they are producing arteriolar dilation by producing hyperpolarization. Okay, so suppose this was the threshold potential. So whenever this arteries was getting stimulus, before it was just from resting membrane potential, it should drag itself towards the threshold potential, out of which arteries were getting constricted. But after giving drugs such as diazoxide, what was happening? After getting activated, it should move so long journey to produce threshold potential, and only after reaching the threshold potential the depolarization occurs, followed by repolarization. Means arterioles will get constricted, but now these arteries require more stimulus to produce constriction. So this is the mechanism of action of diazoxide. It mainly produces arteriolar vasodilation by producing hyperpolarization. Okay, and regarding minoxidil, it is also producing mechanism of action same as that of diazoxide, that is by producing hyperpolarization. So next, talking about the mechanism of action of hydralazine and sodium nitroprusside, what have got almost same mechanism of action, that we shall check out over now. So suppose this is your blood vessel, either arteries or veins. If it is artery, means sodium nitroprusside, or if it means hydralazine. If it is vein, means sodium nitroprusside. Now normally for this arteries or veins to contraction to occur, what is required? Yes, we require the sliding filament theory. Suppose this is your actin and this is your myosin heavy chain, and this is the myosin light chain. Now for contraction to take place, what is required? We require an enzyme known as myosin light chain kinase. So what is myosin light chain kinase will do? It will cause phosphorylation of this myosin light chain. This myosin light chain, after getting phosphorylated, what will happen? I'll enlarge the diagram over here. This is actin and this is myosin heavy chain, and this one is myosin light chain. So for contraction to take place, what is required? This myosin light chain kinase, it should cause phosphorylation of this myosin light chain. So this myosin light chain, after getting phosphorylated, what will happen? After getting phosphorylated, it will interact with the actin, and after getting attached to the actin and myosin will move itself towards one another, because of which the blood vessel will get constricted. This is the normal mechanism of action. Now what happen when we give drugs such as hydralazine or sodium nitroprusside? Means what will happen? These drugs, after entering to these cells, it will get converted into nitric oxide first of all. This nitric oxide, it will then cause activation of the enzyme known as guanylyl cyclase. Okay, it will cause activation of guanylyl cyclase. Next, what this guanylyl cyclase will do? It will convert GTP, that is guanosine triphosphate, into cyclic GMP, and this cyclic GMP, it will cause activation of protein kinase G. Now what this protein kinase G will do? It will cause phosphorylation of this myosin light chain kinase enzyme, and this enzyme, after getting phosphorylated, it will be inhibited. Inhibited means it will unable to cause, this enzyme will fail to cause phosphorylation of the myosin light chain, and when myosin light chain is not phosphorylated, means there won't be any interaction between actin and myosin. When there is no actin myosin interaction, there won't be any constriction. When there is no constriction, means it will cause dilation. So this is how hydralazine and sodium nitroprusside will cause arteriolar as well as venodilation. So this is all about the vasodilators. Now coming to another class of drug, the sixth class is the calcium channel blockers. And over here we need to study three very important drugs, which is diltiazem, verapamil and nifedipine. Okay, so we'll check out these all drugs, plus we should check out the mechanism of action of these calcium channel blockers. So these drugs mainly block the L type of calcium channel blockers, and this L type calcium channel blockers are mainly found on the heart as well as on the blood vessels. Now first of all, on the heart, suppose this is your heart with its arteries, the left heart and the left heart, and this one is the right heart along with its veins. So where exactly these calcium channels are present? Yes, the calcium channels are present on the myocardium, on the heart as well as on the arteries. Calcium channels are not present on the veins. Now what is the role of the calcium ions in the heart? Yes, if you remember the cardiac no action potential, you have got phase 4, then phase 1, we have got phase 4, then phase 0, phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3. Okay, in phase 4 what was happening? Yes, it was the resting phase. Next in phase 0 it was the phase of depolarization where sodium ion was moving inside. Next phase 1, potassium channel open and it will cause odd flux, and then phase 2 where potassium and calcium channel were been opening. Now during this phase 2, during the plateau phase, what was happening? It was causing a maximum contraction of the myocardium. That means influx of calcium ion via this calcium channel, it is required for producing contraction. Okay, influx of this calcium ion is required for producing contraction of the myocardium, and when we are blocking this calcium channel, then what is happening? It is reducing the contraction of the myocardium. And what will happen when the contraction of the myocardium is reduced? Yes, it will reduce the cardiac output and thereby it will reduce the systolic blood pressure. So this is how it is influencing it. Okay, so these calcium channel blockers are reducing the contractility of the heart. Next, talking about how these calcium channels are causing vasodilation on these arteries. Now suppose this is your artery. Suppose this one is your artery, and similarly for contraction of the artery we require same thing, the actin and myosin. Suppose this is the actin, this one is the actin, this one is the myosin heavy chain, and this one is the myosin light chain. And how calcium ion is influencing this contraction means via the calcium channel, whenever the arteries are constricted, it will first of all cause influx of calcium ion. Next, this calcium ion will be interacting with a protein known as colmogulin protein to form calcium colmogulin complex, and this complex will cause activation of the myosin light chain kinase enzyme. Next, what this myosin light chain kinase enzyme will be doing? Yes, you know, this myosin light chain kinase will cause phosphorylation of the myosin light chain. Once the myosin light chain gets phosphorylated, it will cause interaction of actin with myosin, and after getting interacted, it will move towards one another, because of which the arteries will get constricted. Now what we are doing? We are giving calcium channel blockers. When calcium channels are blocked means there won't be any influx of calcium ion, there won't be calcium colmogulin complex, there won't be activation of the myosin light chain kinase, and there won't be any kind of contraction taking place over here. So this is how the calcium channel blockers are producing arteriolar dilation. Okay, so calcium channel have got two use. One use is it is reducing the contraction, second use is it is increasing the dilation, it is producing dilation of the arteries. Now coming to the three important drugs, that is diltiazem, nifedipine and verapamil. Not all these three drugs are producing action on the heart as well as on the arteries. We have got a drug known as diltiazem. First drug is diltiazem. Diltiazem have got action on both myocardium as well as on the blood vessel. That means diltiazem is reducing the contractility as well as causing arteriolar dilation. When this contraction is been reduced, then what will happen? Yes, when contraction is reduced, cardiac output is reduced, and therefore systolic blood pressure is reduced. So diltiazem can be used in the treatment of systolic blood pressure. Plus diltiazem is also can also cause blockage of the calcium channel on the arteries. Arteries means it will cause arteriolar dilation. That means it is reducing the total peripheral resistance. When total peripheral resistance is reduced, means it will cause reduction in the diastolic blood pressure. That means diltiazem is a kind of calcium channel blocker that can be used in the treatment of both systolic as well as diastolic blood pressure. Next, we have got another class of drug known as nifedipine. Now, nifedipine is a drug which is having action of only the calcium channel of the arteries. It does not cause blockade of the calcium channel on the myocardium. It may cause blockade but very minimal, very reduced, very poor calcium channel blocker of the myocardium, but it is a very strong calcium channel blocker which is present on the arteries. Okay, when these arteriolar calcium channels are being blocked, then what will happen? Yes, it will cause dilation of the arteries. Dilation of the arteries means it will reduce the total peripheral resistance, and thereby it will reduce the diastolic blood pressure. That means nifedipine is a very good drug for the treatment of diastolic blood pressure. Now coming to our last drug, that is verapamil. Okay, calcium channel blocker. I have told three important drugs. Diltiazem can block calcium channel on both myocardium as well as on the arteries. Nifedipine can block the calcium channel on the arteries, whereas verapamil is a drug which can strongly block the calcium channel which is present on the myocardium. It can block the calcium channel which is present on the arteries also, but very poorly. It is a very strong calcium channel blocker on the myocardium. So when myocardial calcium channels are being blocked, then what will happen? Yes, it will reduce the contraction, and when contraction is reduced, it will reduce the cardiac output. When cardiac output is reduced, means it will reduce the systolic blood pressure. Okay, so that means diltiazem can be used for reducing both systolic as well as diastolic blood pressure. Nifedipine, since it is causing blockage of calcium channels of the arteries, it can be used for the treatment of diastolic blood pressure, whereas verapamil, it can be used in the treatment of only systolic blood pressure. So this is all about the calcium channel blockers. Now coming to another class of drug. So the next class I'll write over here is the angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor. Okay, the seventh class only, I guess. Sixth class was calcium channel blocker. The seventh class is ACE inhibitors. That is angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, and the drugs coming under this class are drugs such as ending with pril, such as captopril, enalapril, lisinopril, perindopril, ramipril, and so on and so forth. Fosinopil, and many are there. So what these drugs are doing? Yes, these drugs are causing inhibition of angiotensin converting enzyme. So angiotensin converting enzyme is basically present in your lungs, and it is responsible for conversion of angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. And when we are blocking this angiotensin converting enzyme, means there is no synthesis of angiotensin 2, and therefore no angiotensin 2 mediated arteriolar constriction, venoconstriction, or release of aldosterone. Everything will be inhibited if you are inhibiting the enzyme angiotensin converting enzyme. Now this angiotensin converting enzyme, it is not only causing conversion of angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. We know it have got another role also. Okay, so angiotensin converting enzyme, we know its one action is to convert angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. And another action of this enzyme is to cause bradykinin metabolism. Okay, it will cause metabolism of bradykinin. Now bradykinin is also metabolized by angiotensin converting enzyme. Now when you are giving captopril, enalapril kind of angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, then what will happen? Yes, first thing is angiotensin 1 is not converted into angiotensin 2. Another thing is there won't be any metabolism of bradykinin. That means in the blood high amount of bradykinin is been available, and bradykinin is a kind of a vasodilator. That means by blocking one enzyme we are getting dual effect. One effect is we are inhibiting angiotensin 2 mediated vasoconstriction, plus we are getting bradykinin mediated vasodilation. Okay, so this is the use of angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors. But this bradykinin, it is producing vasodilation undoubtedly, but along with this good effect it have got various adverse effects, such as it is producing cough. Okay, too much of cough, dry cough is been produced, plus bradykinin is also it is producing angioedema kind of problem. So therefore bradykinin mediated adverse effect are also being seen. So this is about angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, and a friend of it is the another class, that is angiotensin receptor blocker. And the drugs coming under this class are drugs such as losartan, valsartan, next candesartan, and so on so forth. Various other drugs are there. So the mechanism of action is very simple. What these drugs are doing, they are blocking the angiotensin receptor. And what all are the areas where we can find angiotensin receptor? Yes, it is present on the arteries, it is present on the veins, it is present on the adrenal cortex, it is present on the adrenal medulla. On 4 areas we are finding angiotensin receptor, and in all these 4 areas angiotensin receptors are being blocked. Here angiotensin 1 is been converted into angiotensin 2, but angiotensin 2 mediated arteriolar constriction is inhibited, angiotensin 2 mediated venoconstriction is also inhibited, its mediated aldosterone secretion, everything has been inhibited. Why? Because angiotensin 2 can produce its action only after getting interacted with the receptor, but here we are blocking receptor itself, so there is no angiotensin 2 mediated vasoconstriction or aldosterone secretion or any other thing. So this is the mechanism of action of angiotensin receptor blockers. Now coming to the very last class of drug, which is actually the first line drug for the treatment of hypertension, which is your diuretics. So various kind of diuretics are been available, such as loop diuretics like furosemide, then thiazide diuretics are available, and lastly potassium sparing diuretics are available. But in case of hypertension, the very useful diuretics that can be used are the thiazide diuretics. Okay, thiazide diuretics are being used in the treatment of hypertension. So what is the mechanism of action? Before mechanism of action, what is the role of diuretics? Yes, diuretics are the agents that will increase the urine excretion, and when urine excretion is increased means it is reducing the fluid load inside our body, and when fluid load is reduced means venous return is reduced, when venous return is reduced means preload is reduced, when preload is reduced means cardiac output is reduced, and when cardiac output is reduced means the systolic blood pressure is also being reduced over here. So thiazide diuretics mainly acts on the distal convoluted tubule. Okay, suppose this is your nephron, this is the proximal convoluted tubule, loop of Henle, distal convoluted tubule. Okay, so over here in the distal convoluted tubule these drugs will be acting. So we shall check out. Suppose this is the loop and this is the columnar cells of the distal convoluted tubule. So on the luminar side we have got a symporter, that is the sodium calcium symporter, means it is moving in the same direction. Sorry, sodium and chloride symporter, sodium, one ion of sodium and one ion of chloride, it is moving inside and it is getting reabsorbed into their systemic circulation. So this is a transporter, that is a kind of sodium chloride symporter. Now what this diazide diuretics will be doing? Yes, it is blocking this symporter. When this symporter is blocked, then what will happen? This sodium and chloride will be remaining in the lumen, and then from the lumen it is getting excreted out via the urine. So in this manner, the sodium and chloride, the electrolyte load of the body has been reduced. And when you are excreting large amount of sodium, means along with it large amount of water is also getting excreted out, thereby reducing the preload of the heart. So this is the mechanism of action of diuretics, and these all are the 9 classes of drugs. These all are the 9 classes of drugs that can be used in the treatment of hypertension. I believe you people found this video helpful. Thank you for watching.